It was an ordinary weekday evening, and I wasn't feeling hungry as I sat down for supper. Across the table, my two sons, Ryan and Spencer, were devouring their macaroni and cheese with gusto. They were 15 and 14, respectively, and never failed to clean their plates, fueled by their active lifestyles and typical teenage pursuits. My wife, Kara, occupied the far end. He made sure everyone had enough to eat. It was like something you'd see in a Norman Rockwell painting. Once the boys were done, they went outside to play street hockey. I sat there for a while, drinking my iced tea. I finally mustered up the courage to go over to Kara, who was washing dishes. As I was leaving, I saw Kara washing dishes. The next time you meet your lover, maybe skip the red dress. You look like a $20 hooker walking into that motel. She didn't respond, and as I left the house, I heard the unmistakable sound of a plate shattering on the floor behind me. For the next couple of hours, I mowed the lawn. As dusk settled in, I was reluctant to stop, as I didn't want to return home and face Kara. I took my time cleaning the mower and even noticed it was low on oil, which I took care of while tossing the empty oil container into the trash. I found a tightly weighted brown paper bag buried at the bottom, inside which was the red dress and a pair of red underwear. The panties were stained, but I had no intention of keeping them. I already knew who had been involved that night. Kara was in bed with the door shut. I felt a strange relief. I had no desire to confront her further. The day had started off wrong. For months, I had sensed that something was wrong with Kara. I tried to dismiss the feeling, hoping it would pass, but it only intensified my wife, who's a fourth-grade teacher, usually left for work around the same time as the boys that morning. However, she took a sick day for a routine eye exam. I was a house painter and I'd been working on an apartment complex in Harrisburg, about an hour's drive from home, after hearing about her sick day. I decided to take one for myself and stay home. I've been painting houses for nearly 20 years and I really enjoy it. I think I'm pretty good at it. I supported Kara through college with my earnings. I once thought she appreciated my career choice, but over the last few years her comments suggested otherwise. When she introduced me to her friends, she always avoided bringing up my job. If the subject came up, I could see how she felt comfortable with UNC. It was fine when I was funding her education and providing for our family, but now I felt like a burden. Kara was an excellent teacher, earning more than I did and enjoying better benefits. Her union health plan covered the entire family, and she was building a nice pension. Meanwhile, all I had to look forward to was Kara kept herself fit and attractive, standing at only 5 feet 1 inch tall, but commanding attention with her short platinum hair. I found myself waiting a couple of blocks down from our house, watching for her to leave. When she finally emerged, she was wearing that pretty little red dress, an unusual choice for a trip to the doctor. She looked good. I had always told her so, but the doctor certainly didn't have an office at Sunset. Kara parked her car and walked directly to room 304, knocked twice, and entered. That was all I needed to see to confirm my suspicions. The young desk clerk handed me the registration card without hesitation and exchanged it for a $100 bill. I recognized the name on it, Jefferson. Carter was a familiar face from a few of the events. Kara had dragged me to I couldn't recall the details, but he was somehow connected to the school board or district. I noticed his car parked nearby, left unlocked. It took only a moment to retrieve the registration from the glove box. It was registered to Jefferson and Holly Carter, residing at 45 Clinton Drive. Lancaster, that made me think. I remembered he was on the Lancaster County School Board, and to my dismay, he was married. That discovery marked the peak of my day. I wandered around aimlessly for several hours before heading home. When I arrived, Kara greeted me with her usual cheerfulness. She wasn't wearing the red dress anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I parked my truck behind the warehouse of the company I subcontracted for. I was still sweaty from mowing, but I didn't care. I desperately needed coffee. I ordered some eggs and toast to go with it, trying to kill time before going back home. I wanted to be certain that Kara had left. There wasn't much in the house that I felt attached to, so I stuffed all my clothes into a few trash bags. I put a few things in a few trash bags and grabbed some important documents, my birth certificate, passport, and other essentials, and then I made a quick phone call to Holly Carter. Yes, this is Felix Foster. We've crossed paths at a few school events over the years, but I can't say I recall. What do you want? I just thought you should know that your husband, Jefferson, spent yesterday afternoon. I was at Sunset and reading with my wife, Kara. There was just silence on the other end of the line. I waited for her to say something, but she didn't respond. The boys behind weren't easy, but they were strong, and Kara could take better care of them than I could. She had the better income, and aside from the infidelity, she was the more capable parent. I didn't leave any notes or explanations behind. I figured Kara would figure things out once she saw my clothes were gone. The boys usually got home from school around 3 p.m. morning. A little while after I called Ryan, I found out that his phone could only dial a few preset numbers, but incoming calls worked just fine. Hey Ryan, it's Dad. You on your way home? The short answer is to ask your mother, but that wouldn't really explain everything. It seems like she thinks I'm not good enough for her anymore. Maybe she's looking for someone with a better job or more status. I don't know either way. I'm giving her some time to sort things out. I'll call when I can, but Uncle Jared's place doesn't get much of a signal. You figure it out. Maybe counseling? Nah, son. Look, your mom's got a good job, and she'll be fine taking care of you and Spencer. I'll try to call again this weekend. And please don't tell your mom where I am or that I reached out to you. Take care of Spencer and try to stay calm. I'll be in touch. Bye. At that point, Uncle Jared lived just north of Raton Pass in an area that felt more like New Mexico than Colorado. I never really knew what he did for work or how he managed his finances, but he always seemed comfortable. Years ago, he caught his wife cheating and kicked her out. When I told him my situation, he understood completely and told me I was welcome to stay as long as. I needed to find a way to show him I appreciated the company. Jared owned a good stretch of land, but it wasn't particularly useful for much. It was too rugged to farm and too barren to ranch. Aside from the main house, there were several barns and corrals. Jared had quite a few horses, which I later learned were all boarded for other people. Most folks came on weekends to ride, especially in the summer. The rest of the year, the place was pretty quiet. On Sunday afternoon, we drove into Trinidad to grab dinner and pick up a few things I had forgotten to pack. I got a signal on my phone. I called Ryan. Hey, son. I just wanted to let you know I made it here safely. How are things going on your end? Not great, Dad. I told Spencer everything, and he's furious with Mom. He's not. Even when she speaks to you, she won't explain why you left. She keeps claiming she has no idea. I've tried to get her to open up, but she just shuts down. We're keeping our distance from her as much as we can. You seem to be handling things pretty well. I'm really sorry you've had to deal with this mess. Just do your best. I can't get cell service here at the ranch, but Jared can. I've got a landline, so I'll try calling from there. Is there anything I can do for you and Spencer? We'll be okay. Dad, one thing about Jared's place, it was clear that every single building needed a fresh coat of paint. I had no idea how long he'd lived there, but I'd bet money that a paintbrush hadn't touched the place in years. At least I found a way to pitch in. I went to a nearby co-op and bought all the 5-gallon buckets of red oxide paint they had in stock. I'll pay for Jared's share, of course. I went to the store and bought all the 5-gallon buckets of red oxide paint they had in stock, and I paid for it with Jared's credit card. Of course, we still had a few months of good weather ahead, and I planned to repaint most of the outbuildings before winter hit the main house. However, I would have to wait until spring. The next 2 weekends, I couldn't get a hold of Ryan. I was starting to get uneasy about Ryan. I hadn't heard from him or the boys in a couple of weeks. It had been over a month without any contact. I thought I'd given Ryan the number for Jared's landline, but I wasn't so sure. Just as I was about to start worrying, Jared called. Ryan called me on the house phone. Dad, it's Ryan Spencer. I'm in Santa Fe with Spencer. We need you to come pick us up. Can you get here soon? How did you get there? I can't explain right now. I'm using someone's phone. They want me to keep this brief. We're at the Sky Blue Terminal. How soon can you get here? Give me I'll be there in a couple of hours. Get something to eat while you wait. I'm on my way. 2 hours later, both boys were piled into the back seat of my truck, heading north with me. Spencer was knocked out the second he sat down. I tried calling you several times. Ryan, what happened to your phone? Mom found out you were calling. She lost it and grabbed my phone, smashing it with a rolling pin. I thought about calling the number you gave me for Jared's place, but I ended up waiting. I'm not sure why. Maybe I just hoped things would get better. From what I can gather, things didn't improve at all, and in fact, they got worse. She started going out at night and wouldn't come home until after midnight, often drunk. Some mornings she wouldn't even get up for work. She didn't bother calling in either. Was she going out alone at first? Yeah, but a week later she started bringing guys home with her. They'd both be completely hammered. She'd take them straight to her room, and you can imagine the noise we had to listen to. How did you and Spencer handle it? We waited about an hour, then we snuck outside and let the air out of the guys' tires. We stayed over at Mr. Price's house that night. He let us use it. The next morning, we watched from his place as the guy realized all his tires were flat. He was furious, and it took over an hour for AAA to come and fix it. Mom stood outside on the porch in her bathrobe, but we headed straight to school. She didn't say a word when we got home. Did this happen often? Just once? The next night, she brought another guy home, so we did the same thing except this time we cut the valve stems. They had to tow his car away. He was pretty mad. Mr. Price thought it was pretty funny. After that, she stopped bringing guys to the house. Well, at least you stopped that part of it. Yeah, but she kept going out. Sometimes she'd come home in the morning on her own, other times someone would drop her off. I have no idea where she left her car. One weird thing, every time she went out, she wore one of those red dresses. She must have bought 5 or 6 of them. At least Spencer and I were able to stay home and get some rest. We got a lot of calls from the school, though the district wanted to know why she wasn't showing up for work. She slept most of the time when she was home. A couple of days ago, she was fired, well, sort of. The union wouldn't let them officially fire her, but they've stopped her from going to work. I'm not sure about all the details. I'm sorry, Ryan. If I'd known things were going to get this bad, I never would have left you both there. So, how did you two end up in Santa Fe last night around midnight? Some guy pulled up and shoved her out of his car with his foot. She stumbled up to the porch and just collapsed. We weren't sure. If she was even alive, her dress was ripped to shreds, and she looked awful. I told Spencer to call 911 and then grabbed Mom's credit card from her wallet. I went online and booked 2 tickets from Philadelphia to Santa Fe and had them held at the counter. I wasn't sure they'd give 2 kids tickets, though. I almost booked us. We were originally going to fly to Denver, but we changed our plans at the last minute. It seems like it was the right decision. We had to make some adjustments along the way. What do you mean when the EMTs arrived? One of them called the police right away. They asked if anyone else was home. By the time the police arrived, Mom was being loaded into the ambulance. The ambulance revealed that she had a combination of alcohol and cocaine in her system. I was unaware that she was using cocaine, as were my son and I. They began asking a lot of questions, particularly about the vehicle that had dropped her off. Eventually, a female police officer from Family Services arrived and started asking where you were. If I'd known you were in Colorado and had sent us tickets to come out there, I'd have put on my saddest face and told her we had no way of getting to the airport without an adult. She made some calls and ended up driving us to the ticket counter herself. I guess it was the easiest option for her, and it worked out. Jared and I stayed up until midnight talking about the whole situation. I had figured that Carl would start divorcing proceedings as soon as I left, but apparently I was wrong. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect her to spiral into this mess. I guess she was really eager to get things moving. I've never been good at understanding why people do the things they do. Jared didn't have a computer, so the next morning I spent a good chunk of time on his phone. I finally got in touch with a lawyer in Reading who was more than willing to handle the divorce. When I mentioned Kara's name, he seemed to already be familiar with her situation. I guess word gets around fast in small towns, especially when the police are involved. He assured me that documenting her recent behavior wouldn't be difficult, which would make the divorce straightforward. I had to send him a money order for $2,000. Which pretty much drained me, but Uncle Jared offered to help financially if needed. The lawyer even suggested we go after Kara for child support since she'd made more than me. However, with her now being out of a job, that could complicate things. I reached out to the boys' school and found the staff sympathetic. It seemed like everyone in the district knew about Kara as they agreed to forward all of the school records and even copies of the boys' birth certificates without any fuss. I told the boys they could take some time off until everything was sorted out. The next few months went smoothly. Kara signed the divorce papers, though there was no child support involved. She had lost her teaching certification and had to find as she ended up with a new line of work, but I don't know what. I'm sure it wasn't as prestigious as being a teacher. All that was left was to wait for the divorce to be finalized. Ryan and Spencer adjusted well to their new school. They had a long walk to the bus stop every morning, but Jared and I refused to drive them, calling it a character-building exercise. Life is a little sunshine. Must fall, or so they say. I might have butchered that saying, but you get the point. My bit of sunshine came at the end of May. Jared sent me on a trip to Cloudcraft to deliver 2 horses to a buyer. It was about a 5-hour drive, so I left early in hopes of making it back the same day. That part didn't go as planned. Dropping off the horses was easy. One thing I didn't enjoy was hauling an empty trailer on the way back. It's always been a hassle. About 10 minutes outside of Alamogordo, I hit a roadblock. A truck carrying undocumented immigrants had overturned, and there were law enforcement officers and border patrols swarming the area. They were inspecting every vehicle, especially trailers. I never did figure out what happened. I didn't get to go to the bathroom until I'd made it through the inspection. I pulled off the road near a billboard and finally relieved myself. That's when I realized I had an audience. I walked back to the truck and grabbed 2 bottles of water from the cooler. The older of the 2 girls took both bottles and handed one to a little girl who couldn't. The older woman was in her late 20s with long dark hair, heavy eyebrows, and a golden complexion. The little girl was practically her miniature. They both looked exhausted, dirty, hungry, and scared, so I didn't say much. Instead, I waved for them to follow me to the truck. I knew this was probably illegal, but I couldn't bring myself to care. They hesitated for a moment, but eventually made their way to the passenger door. The older one never took her eyes off me. We drove for about an hour before I had to stop for gas. As I filled up the tank, I pointed out the restroom to them. They were quick in and out of the ladies' room before I was done with the pump. When I went inside to pay, I grabbed a couple of pre-made sandwiches for 2 folks from Colorado. I was right. They were just as hungry as they had been thirsty. There was a Walmart supercenter in Las Vegas, New Mexico, so I decided to stop before hitting the interstate toward the pass. My 2 passengers stuck close by as we walked in. I approached the greeter and soon had a shopping assistant, an older woman who spoke Spanish. I briefly explained what I needed, and we headed straight to the children's department. We had picked out underwear, pants, shirts, and socks for the little girl and the older one. She was more of a young woman, took a bit longer, so we swung by the shoe department and grabbed some comfy sneakers for both of them. Our last stop was the health and beauty section, where we picked up toothbrushes, combs, and some feminine products. The young woman seemed a bit shy about that last part, but she accepted them nonetheless. I thanked the Walmart lady for her help, and she surprised me with a hug, which was definitely not the usual store policy. Still, the bill came in under $200, so after a long day, I decided to stop for the night. I figured the women could use a hot shower and a soft bed, and I sure could too. I got a room with 2 beds and set their new clothes on one. I gestured toward the shower before stepping out and called Jared to let him know I'd be back later than planned. I left out the part about my unexpected passengers, but he would figure that out soon enough. I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought. Whether he liked it or not, he was about to have a cook, and after an hour, I figured it was time to head back to the room. On the way, I picked up a full KFC meal for 3. When I returned, both women were clean and refreshed, looking a lot better than they had earlier. "My name is Felix," I said, smiling. That smile is worth every dollar I spent at Walmart. I'm Brooke, she said, pointing to herself and then to the little girl, Ruby. I'm Felix, I said, smiling again. It felt like something straight out of an old Tarzan movie, and I couldn't help but laugh. We were all laughing together when we sat down to eat. The chicken in a basket didn't last long. We were all pretty hungry by then, so there wasn't much conversation after the meal. I pointed to one bed and they lay down while I stretched out on the other. I kept my clothes on and stayed on top of the bedspread, deciding to skip the shower. Brooke seemed comfortable with that, and they both slept in their new clothes. I wasn't sure if a restaurant would be the best idea, so breakfast the next morning was just a couple of McMuffins from the drive-thru. We got back to the ranch before noon. Jared thought it was all pretty funny. The ranch house had plenty of rooms, so we got Brooke and Ruby settled in. Jared spoke a bit of Spanish and found out that Ruby was Brooke's daughter. Her husband had died. She was trying to make her way to her brother, who worked as a bricklayer in Alabama. Most people stayed behind, but Jared made us lunch and told Brooke that from now on she'd be in charge of cooking. She seemed pleased by that, and I was too. Jared wasn't the greatest cook, but the boys were happy to meet Brooke after tasting the dinner she made. They were even happier when they met her. I didn't recognize half the dishes, but they were delicious. It looked like I'd be picking up some Spanish. While helping her with English, of course, her grammar might end up just as bad as mine. Brooke quickly settled into a routine, taking over the household chores like washing, cleaning, and cooking. Jared was more than happy to let her handle it. Her English improved steadily, and I finally understood where the term Spanglish came from. She mixed both languages together, but she was getting pretty good at making herself understood. Ruby, on the other hand, was picking up English. She was picking up English even faster thanks to spending so much time with the boys and the TV. Sometimes she even had to explain things to her mother, which Brooke found amusing. It was a relief to see how well Ruby was doing, especially since she would be starting school the following year. The divorce from Kara was finalized, and a few days later, a couple of boxes showed up via UPS. They contained the boys' clothes and some personal items, including their original birth certificates. There was just one thing of mine in there, and there wasn't any note or letter from Kara. Part of me was curious about how she was doing, but I wasn't interested enough to reach out and ask. Brooke noticed how happy I seemed and asked Jared about it after he explained. In Spanish, she left the room with a big smile. I took that as a good sign. Brooke was finally able to call her brother thanks to having his address and cell phone number. He was sorry they hadn't seen each other. Other than that, he was relieved to know she was okay. The phone calls seemed to tie up some loose ends for her. The boys were getting really good with the horses. Once all the buildings were painted, we spent our time fixing up the place and tackling all the tasks that Jared had never gotten around to. The ranch started looking less like a rundown cowboy hangout and more like a resort. Before long, people who boarded their horses with Jared began asking if they could stay at the ranch. Brooke thought it would be a great idea to run a B&B on the ranch rather than at a motel in town since we had plenty of rooms. She giggled when she said it, but Jared thought it was a solid plan. We could offer a room along with supper and breakfast with the ranch hands. Jared had to get a license and install fire monitors, but a month later Brooke had her own B&B. A few weeks after that, there was a small article about the ranch. The Santa Fe newspaper ran an article about the ranch, and before we knew it, the Lazy J Ranch had become a popular tourist spot. Jared even had to buy more horses to accommodate all the visitors. He also had to get a computer, which the boys set up in no time thanks to satellite internet. Things slowed down during the winter, which gave Jared time to add an extension to the house, creating 4 more rooms. Brooke got herself a brand new granite chef's cooker, and Ryan got his learner's permit. I spent my days painting, sanding, and working around the ranch while Jared and the boys handled the horses in the evenings. The boys worked on the ranch's website, and Spencer was already taking reservations for the spring. He also taught Ruby how to read, and we set up accounts with all the major credit card companies. Even during the slow season, we were so busy that we started worrying about how crazy the next year would be. Whenever she could, Brooke would sit with me. We didn't talk much, but it was nice having her close by. She always made sure I had coffee or whatever I happened to be drinking. Our communication was improving, but I was a slow learner, and I wasn't exactly the most socially adept. Ryan tried a few times to nudge me into being friendlier with Brooke, but I just couldn't manage it. It was right before Christmas when Brooke finally pushed me off the fence. "Felix, I think it's time for Ruby to have her own bed and her own. I think we should move her stuff into my room. I'll move my stuff into yours today, but I need a dresser. Could you move the second dresser from Ruby's room into yours? It's too heavy for me, but Brooke, there's only one bed in my room." "That's okay, don't worry. I don't take up much space." I was impressed by how much her English had improved. I wondered if Jared or my boys had planned this conversation. Either way, she made her point, and I felt flattered. I'd been careful not to do anything that would make her feel uncomfortable or take advantage of her situation. She'd figured that out on her own. I'd love to tell you about the romantic gestures I made to win Brooke over, but I think I fell for her the first day I saw her. It was a relief to know that she felt the same way and had the courage to act on it when I couldn't. We got married on Christmas Day with just the family and a few close friends from the area. The next year brought great success to the Lazy J Ranch. We were fully booked for months, so much so that we had to turn people away. Brooke hired a young girl to help with the kitchen, and Ryan started to take an interest in her. It was nice. It was nice to see him showing signs of growing up. Sadly, we lost Jared at the end of the summer. He left everything to Brooke and me, not just the ranch, but also over $1 million in mineral rights. The boys were thriving, and Ruby was growing up fast. Life for us was good. It was cold and raining as Carl walked out of Golden Sweet Treats after another grueling midnight to 8 shift. Her hands were aching from hours of placing candy eyes on chocolate Easter bunnies. She held one. She carried a tote bag in one hand and her pay envelope in the other as she went into a small diner for breakfast. Once she was seated, she took out a worn copy of Celebrity Digest from her bag and opened it to page 48. She stirred her coffee slowly, her eyes drifting to the photo of her youngest son Spencer helping Elena Marlowe onto a chestnut horse on the next page. Felix was standing on the porch of their beautiful ranch house, Brooke beside him, posing with Sabrina Hayes. Kara read the article again, just like she did every week, even though she had memorized every word by now. After finishing the article, she tucked the magazine back into her tote and opened her pay envelope, carefully counting her earnings. In about 20 minutes, the thrift stores would open, and maybe today would be a lucky day. Even with the 16 red dresses she already owned, Kara always felt the urge to find another one. You could never have too many red dresses, after all.